Hey, what's up? It's GC Kinsey, here to talk about how reproductive rights are trans rights and why we need an intersectional approach to protecting those rights when we're at risk of losing them. On May 2nd, 2022, an initial draft majority opinion from the Supreme Court was leaked, suggesting that the court intends to overturn the 1973 landmark case Roe v. Wade, which protects abortion rights in the United States. And before this draft opinion potentially becomes an official decision, I think it's important to look at the bigger picture of what this all means and who it affects. I can't help but notice a lot of parallels and overlap between abortion rights and trans rights here in the US, including the way both of those rights are under attack right now in a lot of different states. So that's the particular intersection that I want to talk about here. Abortion rights are one part of the larger category of reproductive rights, which also include things like the right to contraception, to self-sterilization, and to other forms of family planning. All of this is important healthcare and a critical part of bodily autonomy, but unfortunately, it's heavily gatekept in the United States. So even though the ability to have control and agency over your own reproduction is legal, for the time being at least, that doesn't mean it's accessible. People who want a hysterectomy or tubal ligation are frequently told no by doctors for all kinds of ridiculous reasons. They're too young. They might regret it. They need to have children first before they permanently take that ability away. They need their spouse's approval. And even if they can get a doctor to agree to it, they'll probably have a harder time convincing insurance to pay for it. There are similar issues with accessing contraception. The Affordable Care Act mandates that all plans in the health insurance marketplace must cover birth control medication. Which, by the way, is a misnomer because those medications are used for a lot more things than just preventing pregnancy, including managing and treating multiple dangerous health conditions. But contraception has been under fire for similar morality reasons as abortion. It's preventing a potential human life from existing. So insurance companies, corporations that offer health insurance as an employee benefit, state and local governments all have pushed back against the requirement that contraception be covered. And some healthcare providers gatekeep it too, just like they do with self-sterilization. Of course, it goes without saying that abortion is heavily gatekept as well. Some states have laws saying that healthcare providers have to try to convince their patients to do anything other than terminate their pregnancies, even if that is clearly the best decision for the patient's health. Or they might require that patients have to be subjected to unnecessary and invasive medical tests before they're allowed to terminate. And when I think about this level of gatekeeping around reproductive healthcare, I can't help but be reminded of gender-affirming healthcare. Things like puberty blockers, hormones, surgeries that alleviate our dysphoria and save our lives, because those are heavily gatekept too. While some doctors do offer these things on an informed consent basis, many others require that a therapist verify that you are trans enough to deserve them first. And almost all insurance companies require that, for surgeries in particular. Just like with abortion rights, the right to access gender-affirming healthcare is under attack across the United States. Multiple states have either drafted bills or passed laws preventing trans youth from accessing puberty blockers until they are adults, at which point it will be too late for them to do any good. In some cases, doctors who prescribe puberty blockers or parents who support their children's transitions in any way can be criminalized for doing so. And when I look at all of this, reproductive healthcare, gender-affirming healthcare, and this attack on the rights to access both, I can't help but see an obvious connection. It's about power and control over marginalized bodies and the destruction of our bodily autonomy. And it all leads back to upholding the patriarchy. And I feel like too many of us are missing that connection. I often see abortion rights framed as a single standalone women's issue, and that's frustrating because it is so much broader than that. I'll explain what I mean using myself as an example. I have a uterus, which means I'm capable of getting pregnant and therefore I am directly affected by the abortion rights issue. But I'm not a woman, and I am far from the only person in this position. So when abortion rights are framed only as a women's issue, A lot of people like me, are being left out of the conversation. The heaping pile of dysphoria that goes along with that sure is fun too, let me tell you. Every time there's another abortion rights battle in the news, I have to brace myself for feeling angry at the situation and dysphoric about the way it's framed, because that goes with the territory of staying informed, and it is exhausting. Abortion isn't just a women's issue. It's also a trans issue. In fact, all reproductive rights are also trans rights. We don't just magically stop having a reproductive system when we transition, although let's be real, I wouldn't exactly complain if we did. Trans men and non-binary people who want to carry a child should have the right to do so and to be treated with compassion and dignity throughout the course of their pregnancies and deliveries. But instead, they often face disrespect, harassment, misgendering, lack of understanding or education, and yes, more gatekeeping. On the flip side, if they don't want to carry a child, then they shouldn't be forced to give birth if they happen to end up pregnant. And also, they shouldn't be subjected to the messaging that this whole abortion debate wouldn't exist if men could get pregnant. Because men can and do get pregnant. They're just erased from the public discourse. Trans people who want to be sterilized, either as part of their transition process or for other reasons, should have access to the medical procedures that make that possible, without gatekeeping, without having to prove they're trans enough, without facing transphobic discrimination and harassment on top of the usual narrative that you never know, you might change your mind and want to have kids later. Not only do reproductive rights issues affect people of all genders, but there's also a connection between access to reproductive health care and access to gender-affirming health care that I think it's worth pointing out. Which is that a lot of these vital healthcare services are offered at an affordable cost and on an informed consent basis through Planned Parenthood. And guess what always ends up on the chopping block in the wake of the abortion debate? That's right, Planned Parenthood. They have to deal with anti-abortion groups harassing patients and providers outside of clinics. They have to deal with multiple attempts, some of them successful, to cut their government funding and discourage funding from donors. So if states outlaw abortion, or criminalize gender-affirming healthcare, or eventually start coming after contraception, what do you think is going to happen to Planned Parenthood? Their reputation as an abortion provider overshadows all of the other hugely important things they do for healthcare and demonizes them in the public eye, which is really unfortunate because all of that other healthcare they provide saves lives. Not only do they offer gender-affirming healthcare, as I've mentioned, but they also provide all manner of reproductive and family planning healthcare, as well as just primary care. And their affordable pricing model and their informed consent model means that for a lot of people, especially marginalized people, Planned Parenthood is the best or maybe only way they can access healthcare, and it would be devastating to lose that. So please, 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 I am begging you to realize just how much bigger abortion rights are than a single issue that only affects women. Does it disproportionately affect women? Absolutely, and we should say that. But after everything I've just talked about, I hope you can also see how much it ties into larger reproductive rights, which significantly overlap with trans rights, which therefore means it disproportionately affects trans people too. And it doesn't stop there. It also disproportionately affects every other marginalized group. People of color, poor people, queer people, disabled people, neurodivergent people, sex workers, and more. And we should say that too, because we have got to be more inclusive and intersectional in the way we think and frame and talk about this issue if we ever want to overcome it. We have got to work together to even have a fighting chance. There are some people out there right now saying that we don't have a fighting chance. But here on this channel, I try to be about positivity and hope rather than doom and gloom, even when things are looking really grim. So I want to close with a reminder that what we're seeing with all these attacks on reproductive rights and trans rights and human rights in general is just desperate pushback against a culture that is growing more diverse and inclusive and progressive every day. The people in power making all these laws and these decisions are doing so because they are scared. They can see the world changing and leaving them behind, and they are trying to do everything they can to hold on to what they have. And I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it and pretend they can't do a lot of damage on the way out, because they already have and they're not going to stop trying. But they are on the way out, and they know it. The number of bigoted, hateful people who don't want their fellow humans to have equal rights is only going to grow smaller and smaller over time. In the meantime, though, please vote like your life depends on it, because it does. And even if you feel like yours doesn't, I guarantee you the life of someone you care about does. 2022 is a midterm election year in the US. Primaries are already happening right now in May. General election is in November, and it is absolutely crucial that you participate. I've been hearing some discussions lately about, oh, voting doesn't really matter. If it actually worked, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in right now. We voted in more progressive people in 2020, and look at all the good it's doing. But just think of how much worse off we would be if we hadn't shown up to vote in 2020 and hadn't put any of those progressive people in office. So we cannot give up on voting now, even if it may seem pointless. At a bare minimum, we need to do that just to keep the damage at bay. The other thing we need to do is have each other's backs, even if no one else does. That might look like mutual aid. It might look like helping people get in touch with someone who can provide access to healthcare or other resources they need. It might look like sharing our experiences to see where we have more common ground and how we can take a more intersectional approach to reproductive justice. For all my fellow Star Wars nerds out there, remember what it was that defeated the Final Order at the end of Rise of Skywalker? It was just people. People who didn't have anything in common. People who had their own unique needs and struggles. People of a diverse array of species who came from all over the galaxy. But people who banded together when it counted. And we have to bring that same energy when it comes to protecting our right to bodily autonomy, because that's something that affects all of us, and it's something we can't afford to lose. And with that, I want to turn the conversation now to all of you. What kinds of parallels or overlap have you seen between reproductive rights and trans rights? What about other human rights? What does bodily autonomy mean to you? What questions do you have about all of this? Drop a comment below and let's get a discussion going. And I know this is a hot button topic, so if we could keep it civil, that would be great. You can also reach out to me on other social media. I am GC Kinsey across all platforms. And while you're here, feel free to check out some of my other videos. I have more vlogs like this one about my experiences as a queer person. If you are looking for something lighthearted to lift your spirits right now, I have cosplay music videos, I have makeup tutorials, and I have pre-testosterone voice recordings all right here on this channel. So make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for all of your support. I hope you learned a lot and that you've come away with some things to think about, and I will see you on the next one.